Ken Zatterin.
Thank you. Tonight I'd like to give a quick overview of how we establish running times or travel times on the bus system between time points. And as you've noted, this is an important component of safe operation of the vehicle. Josh passed around a graph, which I'll get to in a second as part of the discussion. But we try to give operators proper running time along their route so that they have time to recover from potential short delays along the route, such as giving customers more information, boarding bicycles, or other users in a mobility device. The goal is that they can operate the schedule, get to the end of the line on time, and get their break at the end of the line. We've also noticed over the years that we have to continually address running times as conditions out on the public right-of-way change. Traffic patterns change, traffic volumes change, ridership ebbs and flows, always changing out there. And I might say it's becoming more challenging, I think, over the years as there's more activity in the public right-of-way. The basic method we use in looking at setting travel times on the bus system, we collect a lot of data. We're fortunate at TriMet in that through the satellite tracking system, we get daily for each and every bus trip accurate reporting of the time it took the bus to move between point A and point B. So we're able to collect all of those data and then over the course of a 3 to 6 month period aggregate it. And then the question becomes, based on the variable travel time between, say, point A and point B, what do we write the schedule for? And variability is really a big component of this. For example, you might find the same trip on Monday might take 50 minutes. On Tuesday, it might take 47. And it varies day to day. Also, we find there's variability among operators. One operator on the same day might be able to operate that trip in 50 minutes. Another operator might take a little bit longer or shorter. So the basic method we use is to collect all of those data points and then look at in the 60 to 80 percentile range, so that where we draw that line for the schedule would be so that 60 to 80% of the observations fall below that scheduled travel time. And if you look at the landscape handout, Josh passed around on the backside, there's a graph that's fairly schematic, but it's a good example of that, what I just discussed. If you look on this graph, the numbers up the left-hand side are minutes of travel time, and this is between a single time point, pair of time points on a line. Across the graph is the time of day, so starting early in the morning, is to the left, and then into the late night. The pink line is what was scheduled for this trip. So even just by looking at it, you can see, for example, that in the afternoon peak, which is just under where it says atp.jpg, you can see, for example, there we were not providing enough running time during the afternoon peak period. So we're able, through the use of a computer program, to move this scheduled line, and it will tell us whether we're at 80% or what percentile we're at. And this is the basic method we use to establish those run times. The data is just one part of it. Before we actually would go in and rewrite a schedule, we look at customer comments, yellow cards, and other things help us pinpoint what lines are most in need of additional runtime. And then we do try to get out in the field and work with operators and observe the line firsthand so that we can kind of match how this data reflects what's really happening out on the street. And sometimes there are some extenuating circumstances or nuances to take into account. We do ask operators to report any schedule problems. And I might note one of the, I think, items there is that if a problem is identified, sometimes it can be a while before the change is able to take effect because of the quarterly sign-up system or the public information. So We do try to tell operators that, for example, if you're assigned on a line that's got a running time problem this quarter, and we fix it next quarter, you may have moved to another line. So, we need, I think, to do a little bit more in terms of communicating with operators to get back to them that, for example, yeah, you're right, you pointed out a problem, we fixed it, but it's benefiting another operator at that point if you moved on to another line. We do try to limit our major runtime fixes to once a year. That's usually in the fall to coincide with the publication of the printed materials. Between that one major schedule change each year, we try to limit the changes to plus or minus 3 minutes so we don't have to reprint the public information. One aspect, too, that's important is as we go into fixed schedules in running time, it generally adds time. We have, over the last decade or so, annually added about 250 to 300 hours of service. And, dollar-wise, that can be up close to $1 million gross marginal operating cost.
Count as a percentage,
yeah.
What that 300 hours is, what, 2%?
That's about 1% of the total service operated, yeah, roughly. Okay. One of the ways we've done that in the face of limited budget for expansion is, and I think you noted this at the last meeting, Mr. Walsh, by spreading the headways. So, for example, if a line's operating every 30 minutes unreliably, we would look to go to, say, a 35 or 40-minute headway or interval between buses. That's a way to get the proper running time without adding operating costs. It does slightly reduce service to the customer, but I think to the point of it's better to operate reliably less frequently than unreliably more frequently. We do, though, on our heavier lines, that's limited because if we put the interval between buses too far apart, then we start getting passenger crowding, which then has impacts on travel time and variability of running time. So we try to keep an eye on that on our busier lines. And I do want to mention that even as, recently we've had the reduction in service, we did not, reduce running time or cut out break time to try to achieve that budget target. And in fact, on a couple lines, we were able to add running time even as we were reducing service. So it is definitely a value in our department to try to do it right, and would welcome any comments you have to further that.
Comments for Ken?
What connection do you folks make between scheduling and safety? I mean, is there a yin and a yang here that we ought to be aware of that we might not be thinking of?
Generally, we will work with training a lot and the safety department, particularly if it, for example, comes to establishing a new route or new turns and things such as that on the route planning side of things. In terms of the running time, it's more if training, for example, on some of their observation rides, identify a running time issue, they'll bring that to our attention. So we're fortunate in that we're housed in the same building on the same floor with training, so we do have a lot of interaction with them.
And as a professional doing what you do, Ken, these questions are unfair, but I don't know how to get at the issue any other way. Are you comfortable that you get enough and proper input from the operators about scheduling issues? I mean, does the process you just described to us effective? Do they think it's adequate? Or are the operators some significant amount of the time frustrated with scheduling stuff? I would imagine they are. It's the nature of human beings probably, but can you deal with that at all?
I would always welcome the chance for more interaction with operators. And that's actually a discussion we're having in our department to set up for next calendar year, that we'd like to try to at least spend more time at the garages and in the field. And it might be true of you all. You tend to get caught up in your day-to-day work, and sometimes getting out in the field or meeting and observing firsthand is one of the first things that goes. But definitely would always welcome the chance to get more direct input from the operators and more firsthand observation.
It's pretty obvious, I think, where my mind goes with that is people who have a hand in designing and influencing the design and the operation of a system tend to take better, more intimate possession of it, as opposed to being handed their orders and said, you know, get from A to Z in 2 minutes, and if you don't, something bad happens to you.
Yeah, and I know, you know, most of the time when I ride the bus, if I have the chance, I'll ask the operator, "How's your running time? Is it okay?" And
you don't wear a disguise.
And, oh no! And in fact, some of them recognize me now. So
No, early in the day,
but
you
no,
have
I
blonde
do.
hair.
Yeah.
So actually, I have a quick question. Sorry, I'm asking a lot of questions, but so today you don't. So you walk through a pretty analytical process to determine the scheduling times, but you don't use that accident data that we went through as a data point to incorporate into that analysis today.
That is correct.
Okay.
As an explicit input, we do not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Deb?
Thank you. A little bit to Roger's point, it seems like almost an iterative problem. We're using runtimes based on established schedules, and so the operators are trying to meet the runtimes, but I'm wondering if you ever question, I mean, this again is an unfair question, but if you're questioning if the runtime is a safe runtime, it might be accurate because the operators are trying really hard to meet that runtime, but there might also be some difficulties with that, sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy.
No, absolutely, and I think that's where the field observation comes into play, because we've heard, you know, over the years comments such as, yeah, your data shows you're making it on time, but we're, you know, killing ourselves to do it. Right. We've also observed, for example, where perhaps if we provide too much running time, you know, an operator might leave the end of the line, the beginning of the line late, and then, you know, is able to catch up by the end, and that's not good for the customer, and sometimes can maybe result in a little bit too fast operation. So I think there's so many variables into it. It's almost like you have to observe it and get that information either from the operator or first-hand observation, because the data can only go so far. I mean, it's almost, I think, an indicator, a diagnostic.
Right. I have one more quick question. Do you do more frequent runtime reviews after you have major system changes, for instance, bringing on a new light rail line through downtown where the whole system got sort of turned on its head? So do you do it more frequently than 1 year at this point?
We are prepared to do so. And for example, like when the Transit Mall opened, you know, I spent too many sleepless nights, but probably some sleep over, gee, I wonder if we got the right running time. And we did take great care in that. But we did, for example, say, look, if this Transit Mall opens and our run time's wrong, we're going to have to reprint these timetables and we're going to have to take care of this. One of the issues we face is the lead time is so long. You know, it could be 6 months then, because once the facility opens, we're already into the next quarterly sign-up. That's done and you know, been posted for the run. So we are prepared to do that. And even, for example, this most recent round of service reductions this fall, going to 20-minute service on some of our frequent service lines, you know, we're starting to observe that just from the first week of that, because one of our concerns there was if you carried the same number of people on, or you'd be carrying more people on a 20-minute headway than on a 15, and will that slow you down and then result in additional run time? So that's an area I think we'd like to get a little bit more focus on, to be able to maybe respond a little bit more quickly.